Crazy night shift? Horror story, The Last Shift. It was a cold, windy night when Alex began his shift at Greenvale Warehouse, an old sprawling facility on the outskirts of town. He'd been working the night shift for 3 months now, and though the hours were lonely, the pay was good enough to make it worth it. Or so he thought. The warehouse was massive, with towering shelves that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. The dim fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, casting eerie shadows. Alex's job was simple: monitor the security cameras, complete hourly rounds, and ensure no unauthorized entry. But that night, things were different. As he settled into the small security office, sipping his coffee, he noticed something strange on the monitor. Camera 4, which overlooked the east storage aisle, showed a faint, flickering movement. At first, Alex dismissed it as a glitch. It wasn't uncommon for the cameras to act up in the aging facility, but as he watched closely, he saw it again, a shadow darting between the shelves. He picked up his radio and called out to the only other employee on duty, Jerry, who was handling inventory in the West Wing. "Hey, Jerry, are you near the east aisle?" Alex asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Nope, I'm over here stacking boxes." "Why?" Jerry replied, his tone casual. Alex hesitated. "I thought I saw something on the camera. Maybe it's just a glitch. I'll check it out." Grabbing his flashlight, Alex headed toward the east aisle. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the vast, empty space. The air felt colder here, and the faint hum of the overhead lights seemed louder than usual. As he turned the corner, his flashlight beam landed on something that made his heart skip a beat, a trail of wet footprints leading deeper into the aisle. "Jerry," Alex whispered into the radio, his voice shaky. "There's someone in here. I see footprints." "Are you serious?" Jerry's voice crackled back, now tinged with concern. "I'm on my way." Alex followed the footprints cautiously, his flashlight trembling in his hand. They led to a stack of crates at the far end of the aisle. He could hear faint breathing, raspy and uneven, coming from behind them. "Hello?" Alex called out, his voice echoing. "Who's there?" There was no response. Summoning his courage, Alex stepped closer and shone his light behind the crates. What he saw made his blood run cold. A figure crouched there, its back turned to him. The person, or thing, was dressed in tattered clothes, its long matted hair obscuring its face. The smell was unbearable, a mix of decay and damp earth. "Hey, you're not supposed to be here," Alex shouted, trying to sound authoritative. The figure turned slowly, and Alex stumbled back in horror. Its face was pale and gaunt, with hollow sunken eyes that seemed to pierce right through him. Its mouth twisted into a grotesque grin, revealing jagged, yellowed teeth. Before Alex could react, the figure let out an ear-piercing scream and lunged at him. He dropped his flashlight in panic and ran, his heart pounding in his chest. Behind him, the sound of footsteps and guttural growls echoed through the aisle. "Jerry, get out of here. There's something..." Alex shouted into his radio, but the signal was filled with static. He burst into the security office and locked the door, his hands trembling as he tried to catch his breath. On the monitors, he could see the figure pacing the aisles, its movements jerky and unnatural. Moments later, Jerry's voice came through the radio, panicked and breathless. "Alex, I saw it. It's following me. What the hell is that thing?" "I don't know," Alex replied, his voice cracking. "Get to the office. Hurry." Jerry's heavy footsteps echoed down the hall, but just as he reached the door, a blood-curdling scream filled the air. Alex watched in horror as the monitors showed Jerry being dragged into the shadows by the figure. "No, Jerry," Alex shouted, tears streaming down his face. The lights in the office flickered violently, and the door began to rattle as if something was trying to force its way in. Alex grabbed the only weapon he had, a crowbar, and braced himself. The door burst open, and the figure stood there, its hollow eyes fixed on Alex. But instead of attacking, it whispered in a chilling, raspy voice, "You shouldn't have stayed." The lights went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. The next morning, the day shift workers found the warehouse in chaos. The security office was empty, the monitors smashed, and blood smeared across the walls. Neither Alex nor Jerry was ever found. The warehouse was shut down, and rumors of what happened that night spread like wildfire. Some say it was a ghost, others a deranged intruder, but those who've worked the night shift before claim they've felt it too. The cold presence, the shadows that move on their own. And late at night, if you stand outside the abandoned warehouse, you might hear it, a faint, raspy whisper saying, "You shouldn't have stayed." Crazy Night Shift, Horror Story, Part 2. Months after the disappearance of Alex and Jerry, the Greenvale warehouse remained abandoned, its eerie reputation solidifying into local legend. Teenagers dared each other to sneak inside. Ghost hunters claimed to hear whispers on their recordings, and workers from nearby factories avoided the area entirely. Despite the stories, the warehouse's new owner, Mr. Hargrove, decided to reopen it. Business was business, and he refused to let ghost stories interfere with profit. A new crew was hired, including a fresh security team led by Sam, a skeptical yet diligent worker eager to prove himself. Sam had heard the rumors but dismissed them as exaggerations. He was determined to keep the warehouse secure, no matter what. On his first night, armed with a flashlight, a radio, and a sense of bravado, he began his rounds. The first few hours were uneventful. The rows of towering shelves loomed like silent sentinels, their shadows stretching across the concrete floor. Occasionally, the hum of the fluorescent lights would flicker, but Sam brushed it off as poor maintenance. At around 2 a.m., Sam sat in the security office, flipping through the surveillance feeds. He noticed something odd on camera 7, which faced the south loading dock. A single pallet of boxes had been knocked over. "Great," he muttered. "Probably some rat." Grabbing his flashlight, he headed to the loading dock to investigate. The area was colder than the rest of the warehouse, and Sam's footsteps echoed ominously. When he reached the fallen boxes, he noticed something peculiar. The boxes weren't just toppled, they were shredded, as if by sharp claws. He knelt to inspect the damage when his radio crackled to life. A faint voice came through, distorted but unmistakably panicked. "Help! Don't let it find you." Sam froze. "Who is this? Identify yourself." The only response was static. He returned to the security office, uneasy but determined to stay rational. As he reviewed the footage, he saw something chilling. On camera 7, a shadowy figure moved through the loading dock, its form indistinct, but unnervingly human-like. The figure stopped abruptly, turning toward the camera as if it could see him watching. Its hollow eyes glowed faintly before the screen went black. Sam's heart raced. He called the second security guard on duty, Lisa, who was stationed on the opposite side of the warehouse. "Lisa, do you copy? Something's in here with us." Her voice came back, calm but firm. "I'm on my way to your location. Stay put." Sam waited, his eyes darting between the monitors. Suddenly, camera 4, which overlooked the central aisle, showed Lisa walking briskly toward the security office. But just as she passed a row of shelves, a tall, shadowy figure stepped out behind her. "Lisa, stop! Behind you!" Sam shouted into the radio. The screen flickered, and Lisa turned, her flashlight illuminating empty air. "There's nothing here," she replied, her voice tinged with irritation. Sam stared at the monitor in disbelief. The figure was gone. Moments later, Lisa arrived at the office, her expression annoyed. "What's going on, Sam? You're acting paranoid." He replayed the footage for her, but the figure was missing from the recording. Lisa frowned. "Maybe you're just tired. Let's finish the shift and get out of here." Reluctantly, Sam agreed, but the unease lingered. As the night dragged on, the strange occurrences escalated. Objects moved on their own. Faint whispers echoed through the aisles, and the lights flickered more frequently. Lisa tried to stay composed, but Sam could see the fear growing in her eyes. At 4 a.m., they heard it. A loud, guttural growl coming from the north wing. Sam and Lisa exchanged a glance before heading toward the sound, armed with flashlights and crowbars. The growling grew louder as they approached. When they reached the source, they found a massive steel door slightly ajar. It led to an old storage area that wasn't on the building's blueprints. "This doesn't feel right," Lisa whispered. Ignoring his better judgment, Sam pushed the door open. The air inside was freezing, and the smell of decay was overwhelming. Their flashlights illuminated rows of abandoned equipment and, in the center of the room, a large, rusted cage. Inside the cage was a pile of bones, animal and human, twisted together in a grotesque display. Lisa gasped, covering her mouth. "What the hell is this place?" Before Sam could respond, the door slammed shut behind them. A deep, guttural laugh echoed through the room, and the shadows seemed to come alive. The figure emerged from the darkness, its hollow eyes glowing faintly. It moved with unnatural speed, circling them as its raspy voice filled the air. "You shouldn't have come back. This is my domain now." Sam and Lisa stood frozen, their flashlights flickering. The figure lunged toward them, and the room plunged into total darkness. The next morning, the warehouse manager found the security office empty, the monitors smashed, and Sam and Lisa's radios lying on the desk. No trace of them was ever found. The warehouse was shut down again, but the legend only grew. Locals claimed that late at night, they could see faint lights flickering inside and hear the distant echo of a guttural growl. And those brave, or foolish, enough to approach the building, swear they've seen two figures in the windows, their flashlights shining dimly, as if searching for a way out. Crazy Night Shift Horror Story, Part 3. Months passed since Sam and Lisa vanished from the Greenvale warehouse and the place was left to decay. The local community grew more and more terrified of the warehouse, with rumors circulating about what happened to the missing security guards. But one person wasn't afraid. Jenna, a new night shift worker hired to monitor the facility, was determined to get to the bottom of the mystery. Jenna had heard the stories, of course. She'd even seen the flickering lights from the outside, but she wasn't one to be intimidated by ghost stories. After all, she needed the job, and she didn't believe in the supernatural. Her first night on the job was uneventful, or so it seemed. The fluorescent lights flickered above her as she sat in the security office, her eyes scanning the cameras. The warehouse felt cold and abandoned, the silence broken only by the occasional hum of the lights. But as the night deepened, Jenna began to notice strange things. At 1 a.m., Camera 3, which monitored the loading dock, showed the same shadowy figure that Sam had seen months earlier. It was fleeting, but unmistakable, a tall, humanoid shape moving between the crates. She didn't flinch. Jenna simply chalked it up to a glitch, maybe a shadow from the lights. She'd been working here for a week now, and nothing had seemed out of the ordinary. But as the hours wore on, the figure appeared again, this time more clearly. Jenna leaned forward, her heart pounding. The figure was moving with deliberate slowness, its head turning toward the camera as if aware it was being watched. Jenna swallowed hard and picked up the radio. "Lisa, are you there? I think we've got something on camera 3. No answer. She tried again, but the radio crackled with static. Jenna frowned, feeling a chill creep down her spine. She was alone tonight. Steeling herself, she grabbed the flashlight and headed toward the loading dock. As she walked, the temperature dropped sharply, and she could see her breath in the air. The further she went, the darker and colder it became, as though the warehouse itself was alive, breathing with her every step. When Jenna reached the loading dock, she felt it, the presence. It was like a weight in the air, thick and suffocating. Her flashlight flickered and dimmed, casting long shadows on the cracked concrete floor, and then from the corner of her eye, she saw it. The figure. It was standing at the far end of the dock, motionless. Jenna's heart raced, but she didn't turn away. She couldn't. The figure didn't move, not at first. Its eyes, hollow and dark, seemed to draw her in, and Jenna took a hesitant step forward. Her breath quickened, and the light from her flashlight flickered again. Suddenly the figure turned its head, and Jenna froze. The smile, it was wide, unnatural, stretching impossibly across its face. Its eyes narrowed, and it let out a low, guttural laugh that sent chills down her spine. "Jenna," it whispered, its voice like gravel, "I've been waiting for you." Jenna took a step back, her hands trembling. Who are you?" The figure stepped forward, its movements jerky, as if its joints didn't quite bend right. It didn't answer. Jenna turned and bolted back toward the security office, her heart pounding in her chest. As she ran, she could hear the sound of heavy footsteps behind her, slow, deliberate, but relentless. She reached the security office and slammed the door shut, locking it behind her. Her breath came in short gasps, and she frantically checked the monitors, but the figure was no longer on the cameras. Her hands were shaking as she picked up the radio. "Hello? Is anyone there? I need help." Static. The room felt suffocating, the air growing colder by the second. Jenna looked around, panic rising in her chest. The only sound was the hum of the lights, growing louder. Then the lights flickered, and the door to the office slowly creaked open. Jenna turned just in time to see the figure step inside. It was closer now, so close she could smell the rotting stench that emanated from it. It smiled again, that same grotesque, impossibly wide grin. "You shouldn't have come here," it hissed. Jenna screamed and ran, bursting out of the office and down the hallway. She didn't stop, not even when she heard the door behind her slam open with a force that rattled the walls. She reached the exit, but the door wouldn't budge. She pulled and yanked at the handle, but it was stuck, as if something was holding it shut from the other side. "Let me out," Jenna screamed, her voice hoarse with fear, and then she heard it. A voice, soft and distorted, coming from the darkness behind her. "Jenna." She turned around slowly, her eyes wide with terror. The figure was standing in the doorway, its mouth stretching open in an eerie, silent scream. Without thinking, Jenna turned and ran, barreling down the hallway toward the far end of the warehouse. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away. As she rounded a corner, she tripped and fell, her flashlight skittering across the floor. When she looked up, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The figure was standing at the far end of the aisle, grinning at her with that same horrible, wide smile. But this time, there was something else in its eyes, something familiar. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. It was Alex, the same man who had vanished months ago. But it wasn't him. Not really. Help me." Alex's voice echoed from the figure's lips. The last thing Jenna saw before everything went black was the figure's face, its smile stretching wider and wider, as if it were about to devour her whole. The next morning, the police arrived to find the security office empty. Jenna's radio was found on the desk, and the monitors showed nothing but static. No sign of her was ever found, just like Sam and Lisa. Greenvale warehouse was once again abandoned, and the rumors continued to grow. Some say that if you're unlucky enough to work the night shift, you'll hear it. A voice calling your name, a figure standing just out of sight, and some say that once you see it, it's already too late. The end, for now. Crazy Night Shift Horror Story, Part 4. The Greenvale warehouse was now a notorious urban legend, avoided by locals and thrill-seekers alike. Despite the eerie disappearances, corporate greed knew no bounds. A high-profile logistics company, Omega Freight, decided to purchase the property, promising to restore its former glory and dismissing the supernatural rumors as baseless folklore. Omega Freight installed the latest surveillance equipment, reinforced the building's structure, and hired a team of experienced night guards. Among them was Ethan, a former police officer turned security specialist, and his partner Carla, a no-nonsense investigator with a penchant for uncovering the truth. Both Ethan and Carla were briefed on the warehouse's history, but were given strict instructions to avoid entertaining nonsense about ghosts or paranormal activity. Their job was simple: ensure the facility was secure and deter any trespassers. The first few nights passed without incident. Ethan and Carla conducted their rounds diligently, finding nothing out of the ordinary. The warehouse was cold, vast, and eerily silent, but it was nothing they couldn't handle. However, on the fourth night, things began to unravel. The first signs. At 1:15 a.m., Ethan noticed something strange on the surveillance feed. Camera 5, which overlooked the central aisle, showed a faint distortion, like static, but localized to one spot. As he zoomed in, he could make out the outline of a figure standing perfectly still. "Carla, take a look at this," Ethan said, gesturing to the monitor. Carla leaned in, her brow furrowing. "Could be a glitch or a shadow." "Doesn't look like a glitch to me," Ethan replied. Before they could investigate further, the distortion vanished. The camera returned to normal, showing nothing but an empty aisle. "Let's check it out," Carla suggested, grabbing her flashlight. The two headed to the central aisle, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The air felt heavier than usual, and a faint metallic smell lingered in the air. When they reached the location, there was nothing unusual, just rows of shelves and crates. "False alarm," Carla muttered, but as they turned to leave, Ethan froze. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Carla listened closely. At first there was only silence, but then faintly came the sound of whispering. It was indistinct, like multiple voices murmuring at once, just on the edge of hearing. They shone their flashlights around, but found nothing. The whispers stopped as suddenly as they had started. "Let's get back to the office," Carla said, her voice tight. The haunting escalates. Back in the security office, Ethan reviewed the footage again. This time the distortion appeared on multiple cameras simultaneously. On camera 7, a shadowy figure moved between the shelves, its movements unnaturally smooth and deliberate. Ethan and Carla exchanged a look. "This isn't normal," Carla said. Before they could decide their next move, the lights in the office flickered, and the monitors went black. "Great," Ethan muttered, grabbing the radio. Technical issues on top of everything else. But the radio crackled with static, and then a voice, low, distorted, and chilling, whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Carla dropped the radio. her face pale. Who the hell was that? Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed a crowbar and motioned for Carla to follow him. Let's finish the round. We'll call it in after. As they walked the aisles, the warehouse grew colder. Their breath fogged in the air, and the shadows seemed to shift and stretch, as if alive. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the building. They rushed toward the sound, finding a stack of crates toppled over. Could be vandals, Carla said, though her voice lacked conviction. Ethan inspected the area, but there were no signs of intruders, no footprints, no broken locks, nothing. Then, the whispering returned, louder this time. The voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, overlapping in a chaotic symphony. One voice stood out, clear and unmistakable. Run. The entity revealed. As they turned to leave, the shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. It was tall, its limbs unnaturally long and thin, and its face was obscured by shadows. Its glowing eyes locked onto Ethan and Carla, and it let out a low, guttural growl. "Go!" Ethan shouted, pulling Carla toward the exit. The figure moved with terrifying speed, appearing ahead of them no matter which direction they turned. It seemed to bend reality around it, the walls and aisles twisting and warping as it advanced. Ethan swung the crowbar, but it passed through the figure as if it were smoke. The entity laughed, a deep, bone-chilling sound that echoed through the warehouse. "You cannot escape," it hissed. Desperate, Carla pulled out her phone and used its flashlight. The beam seemed to weaken the figure momentarily, causing it to recoil. "Light!" Carla shouted. "It doesn't like light." They turned on every flashlight they had, creating a makeshift barrier. The figure howled, its form flickering and distorting, but it didn't disappear. "Head for the main door," Ethan yelled. As they ran, the figure pursued them, its howls shaking the very walls. They reached the main door, but just like before, it wouldn't budge. "Come on," Carla screamed, pulling with all her strength. The entity closed in, its hollow eyes glowing brighter. Ethan shone his flashlight directly at it, buying them a few precious seconds. Then out of nowhere, a piercing alarm sounded. The backup security system had activated, flooding the warehouse with blinding lights. The entity let out an ear-piercing scream and dissolved into the shadows, leaving only the faint smell of decay behind. Ethan and Carla stumbled out of the warehouse, shaken but alive. They reported everything to their superiors, but their story was dismissed as a stress-induced hallucination. Omega Freight shut down operations at the warehouse the following week, citing structural instability. But Ethan and Carla knew the truth. The warehouse wasn't just haunted, it was a prison for something far worse, something that wasn't finished with them yet. And late at night, when Ethan closed his eyes, he could still hear the whispering, "To be continued."